Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and while you're at it, click the bell to be notified of future videos. This block is called 2-strip half hexies, and it finishes 8 inches by 15 inches. And this is more a technique than an actual block because you can do anything with these half hexies, just about. And I know this pattern is going to be boring because there's no color in it at all, because I couldn't figure out how to draw these half hexagons in my electric quilt. So I kind of gave up, and if anybody knows how, you can let me know. Here is one version of the half hexagons, and this is just one block that you can make from 2 strips of fabric. And you can just keep going in either direction and just make a large quilt, small quilt, whatever you want. And you'll see how we do that. So this one has pieced edges and it finishes 8 by 15 inches. This version, you trim off the edges and it finishes about 8 inches by 13 inches. Over here, these are just step-by-step instructions for you to have. And we're going to go over those later after I show you some things. I want to show you some different things you can do with half hexagons. This is my Pinterest board on half hexagons. Here's one thing you can do. You can alternate your light and your dark, and you put the lights and darks together in rows. This is sewn in vertical rows. And here's another one. It's sewn in horizontal rows. Here's one where they matched the colors, so they made hexagons out of the half hexies, and these are sewn in horizontal rows. And here are some half hexagons sewn totally different. They're all going in the same direction, and they put the colors together to make this sort of strata of color. Here's a really neat one. These are 3 half hexagons that make an equilateral triangle. Here's another one where they just grouped the colors together. And here's one where they did not trim the sides, they just put the binding on in this little zigzag configuration. So there's more on here you can see. There's a lot of things you can do with the half hexagons. If you look for images online, you'll see them, all the different things you can do. Let's look at the tools that I used. If you're just starting quilting, these 2 tools, the Tri-Rex ruler set and the deluxe corner trimmer, these are not very expensive, relatively speaking, but you will use these over and over and over again in your quilting, especially if you are rotary cutting and you're not using an Accuquilt or something like that. Even though I have Accuquilt, I still use these a lot. I do a lot of rotary cutting as well. The Tri-Rex tool was invented to make the triangle and a square. You can see that it had a rectangle on this side, and then if you flip this over, here was the other rectangle, and it made the triangle. So you had triangle and square, and you can make different sizes with this. I'm going to be using it to make the half hexagons. This tool is a corner trimmer tool, so when we cut the half hexagons, you'll see that we're going to use the 60-degree angle here to cut off the edge. And what that does is it helps you to position the pieces as you're sewing them together. So these I recommend for not only this project, but for just to have on hand as an essential quilt making tools. For Accuquilt, you have 2 versions. You have the small half hexagon and a large half hexagon. The small half hexagon is on this die. Actually, on this die there are 3 different sizes of half hexagons. There are 2 pieces here. You probably can't see, but there's a blade going right down the middle, and it cuts these into 2 pieces. For the side piece, you also have this small side pieces that's used for the square on point. All of the numbers are listed on the pattern. Now there's a large half hexagon. I think it's about twice the size of this one. I don't have it, so I don't know which sides would go with it, but there is a larger one. It's a much larger one. Now let's get into the actual piecing. I wanted to show you the process I went through in coming up with this block, because I've never done these half hexagons before. I chose 2 strips of fabric that's 2.5 inches times the width of fabric. And I have this bin of fabric that I'm not crazy about, and I use it for my test patches and test blocks. I put the two strips together and I cut out all of these half hexagons. I sewed them together and then I had the little ragged edge. The little tutorial I saw online, it said to just cut off the edges. I cut off the edges and I really don't like how that looks. I thought there's got to be a better way. But these turn out that they piece really easy. And it was really fun to put it together. So I thought, okay, I'm going to try something different. Let's see what I can do with if I cut the sides. We're going to be using the Tri-Rect tool to cut the half hexagons. I thought, well, if we're using this tool, this is the shape I need on these edges. I bet this will work. So I just tried it with this and it did work. And I'll show you how to cut these and to get the sides. I like this much better because for one thing, this is a 15-inch finished this way, and this is about a 13-inch finish. So you lose about 2 inches. Here's how we take 2 strips of fabric. These they can be jelly roll strips or just regular 2.5-inch strips. They're folded at the fold, and it's the width of fabric. Put these two together. I'm going to use the Rec tool of the Tri-Rec to cut off the selvage and to cut my first little side pieces. I'll put the 2.5-inch mark, and I'm making sure I'm cutting off these selvages. Put the 2.5-inch mark at the bottom and then make your cut. You'll have to cut twice. And let me turn this around. Now I wanted to show you, this is the little piece I cut off. I've got it turned at an angle. So it was cut off like this. I've cut the sides, and now if you put this back on here, you see this little tiny notch here. And you need to cut that off. It just doesn't seem like it's going to do any good for you, but it actually does. So you see that little mark there. It'll help you position that later when you're piecing it. I have cut off the selvage and I cut one set of these little side triangles. And you'll see I have a left and a right side triangle. They go like this. And the same thing with this. And that's what you need. I'm going to cut another set. So I'll have 2 sets. So I'll flip this over, cut this, and cut my little notch off this too. Now I have 2 sets of 4. Okay, so let's take this. Now we're going to cut our half hexis. We'll take the tri tool of the Tri-Recs. I know you can't really see it. And the 2.5-inch mark we're going to place at the top. Put this at the top like this. And then the bottom one is on the 5-inch mark. And I'm going to move it over. You probably could get your other piece here, but you really don't need another triangle here. Cut this side and then cut this side. So there's our first set of half hexagons. You flip this over, put the 2.5-inch mark down at the bottom now, and the 5-inch mark is at the top, and cut another set. We're going to cut 4 sets. And you have a little scrap left here. Before you take these out of your stack, you have these 2 points down here at the bottom that you want to trim with your corner clipper. So let's flip it over. You look at the 60-degree mark. I want to trim this point and this point. Put the 60-degree angle like this. Now the Tri-Rec ruler is not a true 60-degree ruler. So these edges will not match up perfectly. Just center it as much as you can because you want to cut off this little triangle at the tip. Cut this off. Then you'll see what that looks like. And then do the same thing over here. Try to center it and you're just going to cut off that edge. So now you have these blunt edges cut off, and those will help you when you're sewing your pieces together. And now take your other 3 sets and do the same thing. Cut off all the edges. Now we're just going to lay out our pieces. You can lay them out however you like. I'm just going to alternate the colors. And this would be your 8" by 15" finished block. And this is a good practice. If you have 2 strips of fabric, you can practice making this design or this quilt, because then you'll see how easy it is. And you'll have to keep track of these once you lay them out how you like them. And what I do is I stack each row. I'm going to be stitching this row together first. So I'll start on this end and stack. Just put one on top of the other. Then when I stitch them together, I'll just take the top 2, stitch them together, and take the next one and just go like that. So let's continue stacking these. Okay, now when you want to keep these in order too, this would be row 1, 2, 3, 4. So let's start with row 4, and I'll show you how to piece these. We'll take our top 2, so we'll want to stitch these 2 together. So we're going to take these 2 and flip this over. It's easier for me to see it this way. The little notch you cut here, and then this little notch that actually is the top edge of the fabric, you're going to match those 2. So you match those 2, then you match the sides. And you'll have a little triangle poking out here. And right here is where you start your 1/4 inch. It should be a 1/4 inch. So just sew a scant 1/4 inch from here down here. And here's what that stitching looks like. We're not going to press yet. I'm going to do the whole row and then press them, because we're going to be pressing to one side. And you'll see that if we press to the left on this row and to the right on the row on top of it, these seams will nest perfectly and it'll go together. You need no pins or anything. It goes together just beautifully. Now I will take the next one and flip it over the same way, and this bottom edge is going to be matched right here. So match that and then match the top. So you see how the top and the bottom match just almost perfectly, and that helps you to stitch. Takes all the guesswork out of it. So I'm going to do this and finish the row. All the rows are stitched. They are not pressed yet. I wanted to show you something. As you're piecing all of these pieces, and this is just the corner, but it works the same way. If your stitching comes out right at this V, this point where those 2 fabrics meet, then it will be straight across. So here's one straight across, and if I flip this over, oh, you can't see that. Let me flip this. That comes out right where those meet, and that's what makes it straight across. Now, what we're going to do on this, and if you have big rows or whatever you're doing, and to keep track, I would number these 1, 2, 3, 4. If it gets big and complicated, you'll be just backtracking a lot. I'm going to press one row, this top row, to the left. The next one, press to the right, left and right. And that way, all the seams will nest as you're putting them together, and it's just completely mindless. You just put them together, and no matter how long or short it is, it'll come out perfectly. Now here they are, all pressed. And if we sew these 2 together, flip this over, and you'll see that these seams, this one's going to the right, and this one's going to the left, and they just nest. They just go right there. You can feel them with your fingers. You put them together and you just go like crazy, stitching 1/4 inch all the way down. Here's the finished block. For the last seams, you can press however you like. I just continued pressing to one side because it was easier. So now what do you do with all these blocks? You wouldn't want to put these together like this, or maybe you would. You'd probably put them this way. that might be interesting. Let's say you want to cut for a scrap quilt. Let's take some of these scraps I have, how big of a scrap you need. So if I laid my 2.5 inch at the top and my 5 inch at the bottom, this is probably about 6 inches, this piece of fabric. Yeah, it's a little, slightly over 6 inches. So if you have a strip of fabric 2.5 inches by 6 inches, you can get a piece, you can cut a piece out of it. So you'll just simply cut your pieces. Now these little side pieces you can keep for the sides, just keep them later, or any of the scraps, you can always cut your sides, because depending on how big you're making your quilt, it's going to determine how many sides you need, because the longer the quilt is, the fewer sides you need. So here's one for our scrap, and if you take this, here's an odd piece of scrap, and I just folded it in half. These are symmetrical, so it doesn't matter which way. And here's some extra little piece. I'm just going to stack them all like this. And then put my ruler down and cut the pieces. You just keep collecting all these different scraps and put them however you like. Here's what a scrap half hexie looks like. Now, what do we do with these weird odd size blocks? And how do I make a quilt to put on my bed, or a lap size quilt? If you measure this half hexie right in the middle in this direction, it is roughly 3.5 inches. And I know it's 2 inches tall. So you can consider it a block that's 3.5 inches by 2 inches. If you want to make a 60-inch quilt, you'll take 60 inches divided by 3.5 inches. And that gives you 17 and some change. That means you'll need 17 of these half hexies in one row to get your 60 inches. And let's say you wanted 80 inches tall, you'll take 80 and divide it by 2 inch finished. So that's 40. You'll need 40 down. 17 across and 40 down as a good estimate of that. Now if we multiply 17 times 40, that's 680 half hexies. If you're cutting scraps, you'll just count up 680 of them, start piecing. If you want to estimate your strips, you know you get 8 from one strip. So 680 divided by 8 is 85 strips. You'll need 85 full strips. You'll probably get a little more than that because of the scrap. You might be able to get one more out of each strip, but this gives you a good estimate if you're trying to make any size quilt. Remember, it's 3.5 inches wide by 2 inches tall. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and while you're at it, click the bell to be notified of future videos.